Right, so we have a little bit more than 20 minutes before we wrap up. And the way I suggest we do this, we're going to deal with a few of the questions that have been posted for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and I'll see if I can direct them to particular panel members. Maybe the panel members could all switch their cameras on. But any panel member, please jump in if you have something to say about any particular question. And then I will ask each panel member just to give a final, very quick input on a key challenge around this whole question of generation integration. In other words, the future is coming. It's coming thick and fast, especially if you consider the rate of change of institutions to adapt to such future. And what would you say is one important challenge that we should focus on to facilitate that moving into the future? I'll ask you for that wrap up before we finish. Now, we're not going to have time to deal with all the questions, so I'm going to just select a few and throw them out to the panel. And then this is a question to the organizers, Marcus and team, and Paul. If there are any panel members who can hang around after 1 o'clock briefly, just to have a more informal response to some of the questions that we haven't got to. But I'm going to jump in. Okay, lots of questions. Yeah, we have a question from Edgar Capes. Reverse power flow through transformer from LV to MV will adversely affect the life of the transformer. So how is this considered in the simplified method of NRS 097? Okay, let me guess that Monique or Mfundi might be good ones to respond to this. Are either of you able to provide a quick response there? And we are looking for quite quick responses, please, given our time constraint. Monique, Mfundi, or anyone else?
I haven't dealt with that in the NRS recently, so I don't think I should give it a shot right now.
Okay, if anyone else would like to chime in, then please do, but I'm going to scan for a few more questions. So I'm going to jump around as well, because the earlier questions were sort of linked to earlier presentations, mostly. So we have here a question from Timber Middleman. What is the most important something municipalities between protecting revenue and allowing SSEG to proceed? What is the ideal mix of tariffs, connection fees to facilitate the growth of SSEG for important energy security without undermining municipal functioning? Warrick, would you be in a position to jump in here?
Thanks, thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's a very topical question, and the short answer would be there's not much you can do about your customers exercising their choice in terms of installing solar PV. The question then would be, is how do you respond to it? I think it's been proven that municipalities are trying to sort of dissuade their customers in doing so, haven't been very successful. So I think you're gonna have to take that on the chin and move on. And a lot of the answers will be sort of dealt with in terms of a cost of supply kind of study. You'll have to say, what are the options here? And I think the important thing, the most important thing I would say is don't see it as a zero-sum game anymore. You can say, well, how can the municipality and your customers be in a better off position than you were before? So there are scenarios and ways that you can deal with that and change the costing that you can achieve that. But to just be careful, and just the last one, be careful on just adding a fixed cost to SSEG installations. You know, if it needs to be realistic. To make it too high, you might actually lead. It's a fine balance, but you might push some of your customers to deflect from the actual grid.
All right, thanks, Warrick. Another question from Stephen. It's highly probable that one of the key issues holding municipalities back from adopting integration programs is a lack of resources or competence. Have we considered providing the assistance and building competence? I can respond to that briefly in that there are some support programs around. They are not necessarily meeting the demand in that respect, but there definitely are support programs around. So there's a lot of experience as to how to support municipalities, further reaching impact, I guess, and scale up is the next issue. But as I think I pointed out at the beginning, there are quite a lot of municipalities, municipal distributors that are struggling with the basics, struggling to be viable entities without all of these challenges put on their plate. So quite what we do about that, I'm not really sure. Anyone else from the panel have an opinion they would like to bring to that question?
So if no one else is answering, I think the previous speaker also mentioned about trying to extract a lot of lessons learned from pilot projects. I think it will be important for especially some of maybe the smaller municipalities to see what their larger counterparts are doing, seeing how procurement has been done elsewhere, how SACG is being done elsewhere. But there are institutions that are assisting in terms of capacity building in this field. For instance, the GIZ would be a good example.
Indeed, and that links back to the support program that I mentioned a little bit right on at the beginning. Then also for us to keep in mind the potential role of provinces. Western Cape has had quite a strong role in supporting Western Cape municipalities, and other provinces have not done so to the same extent or not at all. So there's a potential role there, which we need to consider if we're looking at scale up of this support. Hendrik, we have a question here for you. Has Hendrik Raedeni included fixed charges from Eskom side when estimating the savings they can potentially make from purchasing IPPs or from generating their own power? Secondly, on wheeling tariffs approval on nurses' side, what are some of the challenges or key points NERSA is pointing out as issues for not having approved these tariffs yet?
Thank you, Mark, for the question. Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's a good practice not to include the fixed charges. For now, what we did with our estimations, it's only based on the energy part. That's only based on now. We only consider on the kilowatt hour component of it. And then the issue of wheeling, obviously, it does not only affect Ekurhuleni. I think it's all municipalities in South Africa. We had our wheeling tariffs approved last financial year, but this year, for some reason, NERSA indicated that there's no methodology in place to actually regulate those tariffs. The same applies to feed-in tariffs as well. NERSA has indicated that they don't have the regulatory jurisdiction to regulate those tariffs. For now, we are simply just waiting on our legal department to actually indicate what should we do. Should we continue with the feed-in tariffs? Should we continue with the wheeling tariffs, only using a municipal approval? Because I personally believe that maybe NERSA does not necessarily need to play a role between the municipality and the customers, where the municipality is actually compensating its customers. But now, obviously, the opposite is correct, where NERSA regulate the normal price that utilities charges customers. So maybe on this other side, maybe NERSA might not be needed there. So, but we are still waiting for some clear guidance from our legal team. Hopefully, by the end of this month, we should know which way to go.
Thank you, Hendrik. Right, here's a tricky question. Who should fund the additional investment needed to control and manage the variability caused by SACG and EG? Should those who cannot afford to implement SACG still cover the costs caused by those who can? Any volunteers, or should I just direct it at somebody like Mfundi? Are you with us, Mfundi? Is this something you're prepared to comment on?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm struggling with the network now. I'm using my cell phone. I might not have picked your question well. What is the question?
It was who should fund the additional investment needed to control and manage the variability caused by SACG and EG? Should those who cannot afford to implement SACG still cover the costs caused by those who can? This is an issue that some people are concerned about, and an impression that people have that there might be a cross subsidy from those who can't to those who can. Have you got any comment on that, Mfundi?
My comment on that would be it has to be built as part of the power quality and the whole investment into the SSEG. So the customers that apply must bear in mind that the quality of supply that changes the network. Those costs, the accumulative costs or the individual contribution, there should be a determined. It should be the infrastructure that is purchased for that to control that must come from the the person who is installing the SSEG or the IPP. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that comment. I guess one of the important responses around a question like that is that there should definitely not be a cross subsidy from those who cannot afford to those who can. And that means you need to know what your costs are, and your tariffs need to become increasingly cost reflective so that people are, with SSEG or without SSEG, are covering real costs. It's often easier said than done to move tariffs to being cost reflective because they're very political, but everybody agrees that is the direction we should move in. And if anyone on the panel wants to jump in with any of these, then please do. Right, we have another. I think we'll just take one more question actually, and then I'll turn to the panel for a final comment, brief comment each. So this is from Ishmael Jeffries of Cape Town. For residential roof space, what about the NRS 0973 limits? There might be enough roof space, but customers will be limited for technical reasons. Now, I think this falls back to your presentation, Warrick, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Mark, it does, but I'll give a quick answer to that one, but I'll sort of give it to the colleagues that are electrical engineers. So the work that we did for Garden Route District Municipality, that was in some ways academic, or looking at the technical upper limit of how much available roof space there is, but obviously there would be a constraint in terms of how much can be evacuated from that rooftop, and essentially how big the installation would be for the customer. But on the NRS, I don't know specifics to that, but hopefully Monique or others can answer.
Anyone else like to chip in there? I do remember that Cape Town did a study on one of their residential areas, and I think the finding was that the NRS parameters were more limiting than the roof space, but I stand to be corrected there. All right, short of further contributions from the panel, there are many more questions, and if panel members can hang on after the official closure of this event to discuss some of those, we can, if the organizers are okay with that, then let's do that. But otherwise, let me just turn to each panel member and just one comment on a challenge that you think it's important that we focus on so that we can move into what is a fast approaching future as seamlessly as possible. I'm just going to go in order of my screen, starting with you, Warrick.
Thanks, Mark. So I think an important takeaway for me would be is to municipalities not to look at SSEG or embedded generation as competition, to start looking, saying, well, how can what are the opportunities that we can see in this, and to look at sort of they're exercising their choice in terms of, well, if solar PV is an option for my customer, maybe solar PV is an option for me as well. So I think the municipalities understanding what their options are is a really good starting point, and trying to see the glass as half full rather than half empty.
Thank you, Warrick. Hendrik, what challenge is foremost on your mind?
Simple. Thank you, Mark. I think for effective procurement of renewable energy, I would say policy certainty. In this case, we understand that the regulations have been amended to make it possible for municipalities to develop their own generation capacity. But now we need one word, actually one voice from National Treasury, from DMRE, from NERSA. If they can all speak with one voice and hopefully follow what National Treasury has done by publishing the circular, I think that will help a great deal in effective integration of these IPPs.
Yes, good. Thank you, Hendrik. Professor Gomes, your top challenge, or one of the top challenges.
Oh, thank you. I think I can tell it in just 2 sentences. Be prepared, and be prepared for the changes, and be prepared to change. So this is the simple advice I can give to the municipalities, because a wind of change is coming very soon. Thank you.
Indeed, it is big time. Monique.
Thanks, Mark. I think I'm drawing from from my presentation, and also one of the questions that came afterwards now, I think it's quite apparent that technical skills and getting enough people with the relevant skills is going to become increasingly important, and it's already quite a big issue, as we found from our study. Not only in municipalities, but in the industry at large, it's just grown so quickly, and finding people with the relevant skills is just really becoming increasingly difficult. And I think that's why workshops like these and all the capacity building that's happening and all the tools that are available are really important, and it's going to become increasingly important in the future. And just advice to municipalities, try and grab hold of all that's available, everything that is being put out at the market, and to equip themselves, because yeah, it's just going to get worse from here, not worse, better, hopefully. But yeah, there are tools available to equip them, and hopefully they can make use of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Monique. Yes, indeed, lots of challenges facing us, and we need the capacity, all the capacity we can get. Mfundi, your thoughts on a key challenge? I don't know if you're with us, Mfundi. Okay, well, let's assume that you can't connect. So yes, I think that maybe the comment from my side, the key challenge would be just we've got so much uncertainty around the municipalities that have not yet participated in some of these capacity building initiatives, trying to bring them into even the first steps to this transition around accommodating embedded generation. So that is a bit of a concern, and quite what we do about that, I'm not sure. There is support around, it needs to scale up a lot, but I know a lot of municipalities are struggling with the basics of just being functional entities. So there, I think, is quite a big challenge. If the IPP can claim from the city for non-availability, this is Hendrik.
I'm still around, though.
Yes.
I'm still around, Mark.
Great. I saw you did try and address this a little bit. If the IPP can claim from the city for non-availability of the grid deemed energy payment, can the municipality also claim from the IPP for non-availability of generation?
Yes, that is true. That is true. It works both ways.
Right, great. Let me scroll down and up. Why are we using working agricultural land for solar, or is it going to be multi-use where there's still crops in between panels? Hendrik, you've got some land allocated for your solar IPPs. Could you comment on what sort of land that is?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is we're going to use council land and also private land. But now on the council land, there is a farm, 521 hectares, but only half of that case is usable. And then we can only accommodate 10 there. So currently that farm, it's actually subsistence farming. So that's why it's not much of an issue. But now we are also looking at a possibility of actually doing a multi-use, meaning that now whatever the farming activities that are continuing is their way, maybe they can still continue even with the solar panels there. Yeah.
Thanks, Hendrik. So here's another question from Aaron. Small scale connections are currently up to 350 kVA. Yes, they don't need a grid impact study if they're up to that level. Revision is looking at 1 megawatt. This is revision of NOS 723. Is there any reason why reference is now made to megawatt and not MVA? Anyone, I mean, I've got thoughts on that, but I think some of you are much more technical than me. Please jump in. How about you, Monique?
Thanks, Mark. I'm not, at the moment, we use basically megawatts when we talk about generation, and MVA when we talk about load, and we've used that for the past and for the foreseeable future. I don't know how that the MVA level can be related to generation, but we've always just stuck with megawatt values. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, thanks. I think people often use these a little carelessly, and I know that I do, and I know that in many cases, for I think, if I'm not mistaken, with solar, for example, megawatts and MVA or KVA and MVA, KVA and kilowatts are the same because of the power factor. But yeah, I'm not a specialist in this area, so let's hope we've provided enough background there. We have something from Paul Vermeulen. Would it not be simpler to require that for the inverters to execute proper voltage control that would automatically throttle output if voltage rises? In Arizona 7 standard was written at the time inverters were dumb and times have changed. To me, that sounds like a very useful suggestion, and maybe something NRS 097 working groups can take on board. Is this something any of our panel can comment on? Okay, I think we're not the right bunch for this. I know people who could comment on it, but I don't think they're a part of the meeting. Right, let's see what questions if anyone can see questions that are not answered, then please just chirp in and shout them out. But I think we should fund, I think we are reasonably well covered. Question from Jose Tiago: is our distribution network capable of carrying the extra load from external power providers? This would be a good comment to have from Eskom. What is the general sense? I guess, Hendrik, you are a key one there, possibly also Monique. To what extent is the distribution system overloaded? What is the hosting capacity? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, from my side, obviously, before you integrate all these SSGs or IPP plants, obviously there are some studies that needs to be done before anything. I mean, the grid impact studies, the load flow, grid code compliance issues, so that needs to be done well before anyone can build the plant. Because currently what we are doing is, you'll find that now, for example, a substation does have capacity there, but to find that the loading is not so much, all right? And then now it becomes an issue where the IPP wants to connect on that substation, and then finding it that it's actually a primary substation. What I mean is that now this is a Ekurhuleni substation where we get power directly from Eskom. So now if the IPP will inject more power there than what the loading is on that substation, the remainder will flow back to Eskom, which then becomes an issue. But now I think in terms of the hosting capacity of municipalities, yes, I think we can. Obviously, you scale your plans, you scale the SSGs based on your hosting capacity. So I think if you get positive results from there, yes, you can integrate this with no problem.
Yeah, thanks, Hendrik. And just in your experience, you have quite a lot of embedded generation within Ekurhuleni. Was it fairly easily accommodated? Did grid impact studies that needed to be done come back with positive results in saying that the generators could be connected? Or did you come across a lot of medium to larger systems where the network could not handle it?
Yeah, look, we've got almost, I think, above 200 megawatts of SCG that are registered on our system. But prior 2020, because I only joined this division in 2020 October, but prior that, there wasn't really grid impact studies that were conducted. But when I started, then that's when we started doing grid impact studies for all generations above 350. But currently we've increased that limit to 1 megawatt. So all generators above 1 megawatt, they need to conduct a grid impact study. But the studies that we've received so far, there isn't any study that came back that actually shows a negative impact on the grid. Most of the suggestion will probably be on the export, because some of these generators will export, especially during weekends and during December time when the companies are closed. So now you'll find that now we needed to check the loading at that substation where the customer is connected on. We check what is the loading on that substation. Can the loading of that substation during that time manage to absorb the exported electricity, energy from this SCG? And then if that will not, again, check what will be our purchasing cities. How is our program of our purchasing cities? How will they react by seeing, when seeing or when sensing reverse feed? So those are some of the things that we look at, but we haven't really received a study, that shows negative impact. Because most of them are normally scaled well within 75% of the customer's energy, so you hardly really see much of an impact.
All right, thanks, Hendrik. That's useful. Your practical experience there is valuable. Just going to do 2 more questions and then wrap up. I see it. Okay, yes. So there's a question here from Busika. Planning and commissioning of IPPs is one thing. Operating power system networks with active embedded IPP generation is a whole other issue. Have municipalities started upskilling their resources in preparation of managing distribution network operations with bi-directional power flow? I don't know if any of the panelists want to jump in there. My sense is on the small scale, it's one thing. On the larger scale, it's another. And there are very few municipalities that are comfortable engaging and integrating large-scale IPPs at the moment. But Hendrik, you guys are one of the front runners there. You've got sorry to hand this back to you again, but what's your comment on that, the comment from Busika?
Yeah, look, now that's true. That's actually true. Yeah, it's easy to integrate, but to actually monitor, because obviously this is the function that mainly was performed by Eskom. But now as things goes, and even with the Ekurhuleni, that is a function that now needs to be introduced on our control center. Monitoring. There might be a system operator monitoring all these power plants and also complying with the grid code. So yes, that's something that we are actually implementing, so that at least we can actually monitor this via our systems operator. Yes, so now we're gonna do that. But obviously at the moment that might also include the SSGs as well. But for IPP, yes, we need to play a role of a system operator.
Thanks, Hendrik. Yes, new challenges for municipalities. Then the last one is from Charles. Is the market ready to produce the materials required for the new projects, or is it heavily dependent on imports? Is there an import substitution strategy to deal with imports and sustainability issues? So it's quite a general question, because you have IPPs, you have batteries, you have a range of different types of components, panels, inverters, and more. And I know that I think at the moment it is reasonably dependent or reasonably reliant on imports in some of those areas, but in others not really at all. And the Department of Trade and Industry and Operation Vulindlela recently eased the requirements around local content to some extent. I'm not sure what that tells us. But I don't know if any of the panelists have a last word on this last question around the materials and import dependence or not, because obviously it's an opportunity for local growth. Any broad thoughts on this?
I think okay, I just got maybe a bit of the questions, but I heard it you saying the local contents and things like that. Look, as part of the IPP program, there are some economic obligations that the IPP will need to do or to perform. And then the issue of local content, then that becomes a tender evaluation criteria. So also just trying to grow the local economy. So there's a certain percentage, that is imposed during tendering process, where the IPP needs to comply with, be it on material, sort of like 18% or 20% should be local. So those are the things that you put on the tendering spec. and then also socioeconomic obligations like appointment of local labor, for menial jobs and things like that. So yeah, I think that we have tried to incorporate that on the tendering spec so that at least they comply from the beginning.
Thanks very much. And I don't know, Warrick, in your modeling of integrated energy modeling on the garden route, if there was anything you came across which was pointing to more local or more import in the sort of mixes that you considered?
It was on the to-do list, but we never got to it, to be honest. But further to the IPP procurement, so the discussions and part of the electricity crisis plan was not to sort of there was just conversations around reducing local content requirements on a temporary basis, just because essentially we had bid window sort of 4, and then 4 or 5 years later we had bid window 5. So a lot of the industry had closed down or had gone slightly backwards. So the requirements were just sort of slightly reduced to account for that. But as we've seen, government is committed in procuring renewable energy. So hopefully that local manufacturing will increase again. I think the sector is building itself up. And a lot of that might not just be coming from the IPP program, but from sort of the commercial and industrial space as well. It doesn't all need to be part of REAP.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Warrick. Okay, and then just to mention, I'm not going to pose this as a question, but I see a last comment has come in around microgrids being an inherent part of the future. That's the opinion of Solani, and the concern that we must not leave poor communities beside as affluent neighborhoods put PV on the roof or whatever the case might be. Yes, absolutely an important consideration. And that's sort of, for me, mentally, that links back to the many struggling municipalities, municipal distributors that we have, and seeing that they are somehow also considered, included, and are not left to struggle as everybody else moves into this attractive future. But with that, I think I'm going to, I see Warrick, you have a hand up. Please jump in.
Yeah, sorry, Mark, just further to that, if I may add, the situation around leaving vulnerable groups behind, I think a key strategy that municipalities should look into is trying to incentivize their current customers and new customers to remain connected to the grid. There's sort of this grid community approach where they can use that connected customers to subsidize your poorer customers. But if your customers are starting to deflect, then you can't subsidize from them. So I think there's always this role of sort of Ubuntu in terms of keeping your customers connected and incentivizing them to do so, not just sort of guilt tripping them and saying, well, if you disconnect them, we can't subsidize the poor, but rather say, well, we can provide financial incentives for you to remain connected to the grid. And that obviously speaks by the communication between the municipality and the customers, which is almost entirely through the tariffs. So it's very key to consider that in the way they structure their tariffs.
Very good point. Thank you very much. All right, so Marcus, I propose we wrap this up, and 135 people supposedly still listening. But yeah, I think we've addressed most of the questions. So should we do that, Marcus?
Yes, thank you, Mark, for your great facilitation today. I think without your experience, this could have gone differently. So much appreciated for your efforts, and hope to catch you online at some stage in the future.
Yes, and thanks to you, and thanks to everybody who contributed. It was great. Thank you. And to all of the participants, and for all of the questions.